7 years of marriage, 7 years of believing I had a partner, a soulmate, 7 years of thinking we were building a life together. Yet here I was, standing in the last place I ever thought I'd be, St. Mary's Church, clutching the back of a pew so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The wedding march played softly in the background, each note cutting into me like a knife. My husband Jacob stood at the altar, wearing the same smile he had on our wedding day. Except this time, it wasn't for me. My eyes burned as I watched him waiting for the bride. But it wasn't just any bride. No, it was Ashley, the woman I called my best friend since childhood. She was the one I trusted with every secret, every heartbreak, every triumph. The same Ashley who was my maid of honor, standing beside me when I married Jacob 7 years ago. And now, she was the one wearing white, walking down the aisle to marry the man I thought was mine forever. I wasn't invited to this wedding, of course. No, I found out about it purely by accident. A misplaced email on Jacob's laptop, a florist's receipt for a bouquet I never received. And then, the ultimate insult, Jacob's late-night texts to me, claiming he was working overtime while planning a future with her. Jacob's text buzzed in my pocket even now. "Running late, babe. Long meeting. Don't wait up." I read it and felt my stomach churn. He was still lying to me, even as he stood at the altar, moments away from marrying someone else. I glanced around the church. The pews were filled with smiling faces, her family, his co-workers, a few mutual acquaintances who clearly had no idea the betrayal unfolding. They all looked so happy, so blissfully unaware of the web of lies tying these two together. Ashley finally reached the altar, her dress sparkling under the soft church lights. She looked beautiful. Of course she did. She always did. That was Ashley's specialty, being perfect, charming, and stealing the spotlight without even trying. Jacob took her hands in his, gazing at her like she was the only woman in the world. My stomach twisted again, but I forced myself to stay rooted in place. I wasn't going to storm in and stop the wedding. No, that would be too easy for them. Instead, I stood silently, hidden in the shadows of the church balcony, watching, waiting. As the priest began to speak, my mind raced back to the moments that brought me here. The first red flag I ignored. The late nights Jacob claimed to be working, when in reality, he was with her. The way Ashley had suddenly grown distant, her calls and visits becoming less frequent, always with some vague excuse. But the final blow came 2 weeks ago, when I stumbled upon Ashley's journal in her apartment. She had always been careless, leaving things lying around. I had gone to visit her, still trying to mend the rift between us, unaware of what was truly happening. Her journal was open on the coffee table, and one sentence caught my eye. "Can't wait to finally marry Jacob and leave this all behind." I felt my world crumble in that moment. The air left my lungs, and for a second I thought I was dreaming. But the pain in my chest was real, and so was her betrayal. Now, as I stood there in the church, every word of that journal entry replayed in my mind. Every lie they told me, every moment they shared behind my back, burned into my memory. The priest's voice pulled me back to the present. "Do you, Jacob, take Ashley to be your lawfully wedded wife?" I held my breath, waiting for his answer. "I do," Jacob said, his voice steady, full of confidence. It was as if he'd never loved me, as if the last 7 years were nothing but a convenient illusion. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. They didn't deserve my tears. Not anymore. As the ceremony continued, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I realized something important. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd fooled me, cast me aside like yesterday's trash. But they were wrong. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. And while they exchanged vows and sealed their lies with a kiss, I made a vow of my own. They would pay for what they'd done. Not with screaming or public scenes. No, that would be too simple, too satisfying for them. I wanted them to suffer the way I had, to feel every ounce of betrayal, heartbreak, and humiliation they'd inflicted on me. I left the church quietly, unnoticed, blending into the crowd as they cheered for the newlyweds. My heart ached, but my resolve was stronger than ever. Jacob and Ashley might have thought they'd pulled off the perfect betrayal, but they were about to learn the hard way that nothing stays hidden forever. Walking out of St. Mary's Church was surreal. The cold air hit me like a slap, but I welcomed it. It reminded me I was still alive, still capable of feeling. My chest felt heavy, and my legs wobbled, but I kept moving. The sound of cheers and clapping from inside the church faded as I walked further away. The sky was gray, a reflection of the storm brewing inside me. I couldn't go home, not yet. The home Jacob and I had built together now felt like a crime scene, full of memories that mocked me. Every corner of that house had been touched by their lies. I found myself sitting on a bench in the park across from the church. My mind was racing, replaying the events I had just witnessed. Jacob's smile, Ashley's radiant glow, the way they looked at each other like they had never done anything wrong. I unlocked my phone, scrolling through the texts Jacob had sent me over the past few weeks. Working late, babe. Big project due soon, don't wait up. Heading to a client dinner, love you. The audacity, how could someone lie so effortlessly? How could he sit across from me at our dining table, look me in the eyes, and tell me he loved me while planning a life with someone else? I opened Ashley's contact. Her name stared back at me, a reminder of the years we'd spent as inseparable best friends. We met when we were 10. She was the loud, fearless one, always pulling me out of my shell. I was the quiet, dependable friend who always had her back. The betrayal wasn't just Jacob's, it was hers too. She knew me better than anyone. She knew my dreams, my insecurities, my hopes for the future. And she took all of that and tore it apart without a second thought. I thought back to the journal entry I found 2 weeks ago. Ashley had written about their affair in vivid detail, documenting every secret meeting, every whispered promise. At first, I didn't believe it. I thought it had to be some kind of cruel joke. But when I confronted Jacob with the journal, he denied it so convincingly that I started to doubt myself. I can't believe you're accusing me of this, he had said, his voice laced with fake outrage. Ashley? She's like a sister to me. How could you even think that? The memory of his lies made my blood boil. I had wanted to believe him so badly, but the signs were there, and I had ignored them. For the next week, I played the role of the clueless wife, pretending everything was fine while digging for the truth. That's how I found the email about the wedding. It was an invitation Jacob never meant for me to see. Jacob and Ashley cordially invite you to their wedding. The words felt like acid on my tongue. I had stared at the screen for what felt like hours, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. And now, here I was. The wedding was over. The damage was done. The question was, what would I do next? For a brief moment, I considered walking away, letting them have their pathetic little life together. Maybe they deserved each other, two liars trapped in a web of their own deceit. But then I thought about the years I had poured into my marriage, the sacrifices I made, the way I put Jacob's dreams ahead of my own. I wasn't going to let them get away with this, but I needed a plan. I pulled out a notebook from my bag, the same one I used to jot down grocery lists and weekend plans. This time, it would serve a different purpose. I opened it to a blank page and wrote two names at the top, Jacob Ashley underneath. I started listing every piece of information I had. Their lies, their patterns, their weaknesses. Jacob's obsession with his reputation at work. Ashley's need for validation and attention. I wasn't going to act out of anger. Anger was messy, unpredictable. I needed precision. I needed to hit them where it hurt the most. As I wrote, a sense of calm settled over me. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had control over something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my power, my sense of self. I glanced at my phone again. There was another text from Jacob. Heading home soon. Want me to grab dinner on the way? I laughed bitterly. The nerve of him. Sure, I replied. Surprise me. Let him play his little game. He didn't know what was coming. By the time I left the park, I had the beginnings of a plan. Jacob and Ashley thought they'd won, but the game was far from over. If they wanted to build a life on lies, I'd make sure those lies crumbled beneath them. That evening, Jacob came home like nothing had happened. He waltzed through the door carrying a bag of takeout, humming a tune as if he were the perfect husband. The sight of him made my stomach turn, but I kept my face neutral, offering a small smile as he walked into the kitchen. Hey babe, he said, placing the bag on the counter. Figured we could do Thai tonight. Thought you'd like that. The audacity of him, acting as though everything was fine. It took every ounce of strength not to scream at him, not to throw the takeout bag in his face and demand answers. But I couldn't. Not yet. Thai sounds great, I said, keeping my tone light. Let me grab some plates. I moved around the kitchen, my hands steady despite the storm raging inside me. Jacob started talking about his day at work, spinning lies as easily as breathing. Long meetings, back to back, he said, shaking his head. Sometimes I feel like I live at the office. I nodded, pretending to listen, while my mind was elsewhere. The image of him standing at the altar with Ashley kept flashing in my head. How could he stand here now, lying to my face after everything I'd seen? Must be exhausting, I replied, setting the table. You should take some time to relax. He smiled at me, and for a brief moment, I saw the man I fell in love with. The man who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms, who surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays. But now, I knew better. That man was gone, if he ever truly existed. We sat down to eat, and I forced myself to act normal. Jacob filled the silence with small talk, oblivious to the fact that I was studying him, memorizing every detail. His casual tone, the way he avoided eye contact when he lied. It was all ammunition for the battle ahead. After dinner, he kissed my forehead and said he had some work emails to catch up on. I watched him disappear into his office, and once the door closed, I finally let myself breathe. I pulled out my notebook, flipping to the page where I had started mapping out my plan. The first step was gathering evidence. I couldn't rely on Ashley's journal alone. No one would believe a handwritten confession from her. I needed hard proof. I thought about Jacob's phone. He was always so careful with it, never leaving it unattended for long. But tonight, His guard was down. I crept down the hallway, pausing outside his office door. I could hear him typing, probably sending another set of lies to Ashley. His phone wasn't with him. It was charging on the kitchen counter, right where he left it after dinner. I tiptoed back to the kitchen, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I grabbed his phone and unlocked it with the code I had memorized long ago, his birthday. How fitting that the key to his secrets was the same day I used to celebrate every year. The screen lit up and I quickly navigated to his messages. There they were, texts to Ashley, filled with sweet nothings and plans for their future. I miss you already. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow. You looked stunning today. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. My stomach turned as I scrolled further. There were photos too. Pictures of them together, smiling and laughing. Pictures of Ashley in the wedding dress she wore today. I took screenshots of everything, sending them to myself before deleting the evidence from his phone. Then I placed it back on the counter, exactly where he left it. Step 1 was complete. The next step was Ashley. I needed to confront her, but not in the way she'd expect. She thrived on drama, always craving attention. A public showdown would only feed her ego. No, I needed to get inside her head, to make her feel the weight of her betrayal. The next morning, I sent her a message. "Hey, Ashley. Can we meet for coffee? I really need to talk to you." She replied almost instantly. "Of course. Is everything okay?" Her fake concern made my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Just some personal stuff," I wrote back. "I could really use your advice." We agreed to meet at a cafe later that afternoon. I spent the rest of the day preparing, rehearsing what I would say. I wasn't going to let her see me break. When I arrived at the cafe, Ashley was already there, sipping a latte and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled when she saw me, her expression warm and inviting. "Hey, you," she said, standing to give me a hug. "It's been too long." I hugged her back, forcing myself to play the part. "Yeah, it really has." We sat down and she launched into small talk, asking about my job, my health, my plans for the weekend. It was almost impressive how effortlessly she acted like nothing was wrong. But then, she always was a good actress. I waited until she finished her latte before dropping the first bomb. "I saw Jacob yesterday," I said casually, stirring my coffee. Her smile faltered for just a second, but she quickly recovered. "Oh? How's he doing?" "He's fine," I said, meeting her gaze. "He looked happy, at the wedding." Her face went pale, her smile frozen in place. "The wedding?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," I said, leaning in slightly. "The one at St. Mary's. You looked beautiful, by the way." She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, Ashley was speechless. I smiled, savoring the moment. This was just the beginning. Ashley's face went through a series of emotions: shock, confusion, and finally, a flicker of fear. She stared at me, her latte forgotten, as if trying to figure out how much I knew. "Oh, that," she started, her voice shaky. I can explain." "No need," I interrupted, leaning back in my chair with a calmness that didn't match the storm inside me. "You don't owe me an explanation, Ashley. After all, we're friends, right? Sisters, even." The word sisters dripped with venom, but I kept my expression neutral. Ashley swallowed hard, her hands gripping the edge of the table. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this," she whispered, her eyes darting around the cafe as if searching for an escape route. Find out what? I asked innocently, tilting my head. That my husband married my best friend while lying to my face? That the two people I trusted most stabbed me in the back? She flinched, and I saw her mask begin to crack. It's not what you think, she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. Jacob and I... It just happened. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I raised an eyebrow, resisting the urge to laugh at her pathetic excuse. It just happened. That's funny because weddings usually take months to plan. I'm pretty sure that's the opposite of just happened. Ashley opened her mouth to respond but closed it again, realizing she had no defense. I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a whisper. Do you know what the worst part is, Ashley? It's not the lies. It's not even the betrayal. It's the fact that you sat there, watching me pour my heart out to you, pretending to care while you were planning this circus behind my back. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. She'd made her bed, and now it was time for her to lie in it. I know I've hurt you, she said softly, her voice trembling. But I never meant to. I swear, I didn't. Didn't mean to? I repeated, my tone sharp. You didn't mean to fall in love with my husband. Didn't mean to wear a wedding dress and say I do. Help me understand, Ashley, because I'm struggling to see how any of this could be an accident. She didn't respond, her silence speaking louder than any excuse she could have made. I leaned back, letting the weight of my words sink in. Here's the thing, I said, my voice cold. I'm not here to fight with you. I just wanted you to know that I saw everything. I know everything. And trust me, I'll make sure you both get exactly what you deserve. Ashley's eyes widened in fear, and for a moment, I thought she might break down right there in the cafe. But she composed herself, her expression hardening. What are you going to do? She asked, her voice laced with defiance. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Oh, Ashley, that's for me to know and for you to find out. With that, I stood up, grabbing my bag and leaving her sitting there, stunned and speechless. When I got home, Jacob was in the living room, watching TV like nothing had happened. The sight of him lounging on the couch, so comfortable in his lies, made my blood boil. How was your day? He asked, without looking away from the screen. Uneventful, I replied, forcing a smile. Just ran some errands, met up with Ashley for coffee. His head snapped toward me, his expression tightening for a split second before he masked it with a casual smile. Oh? How is she? He asked, feigning innocence. She's fine, I said, watching him closely. We had a nice chat. He nodded, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands fidgeted slightly. He knew I was onto him, but he didn't know how much I knew. And that was exactly how I wanted it. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing, replaying every detail of my conversation with Ashley, every lie Jacob had told me. I couldn't let them win, but I also couldn't act impulsively. I needed more leverage. The next morning, while Jacob was in the shower, I slipped into his office. His laptop was open, and I quickly accessed his email. My hands trembled as I scrolled through his inbox, searching for anything I could use. And then I found it. A string of emails between Jacob and Ashley, planning their wedding, discussing their future, and mocking me in the process. She has no idea, one email read. It's almost too easy. Poor thing, Ashley had replied. She's so clueless. My vision blurred with rage, but I forced myself to stay calm. I forwarded the emails to myself, then deleted the evidence from his sent folder. When Jacob came out of the shower, I was sitting at the dining table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. He kissed me on the cheek, and I smiled back, playing the part of the loving wife. But inside, I was seething. I had everything I needed now: proof of their betrayal, ammunition for the war I was about to wage. Jacob and Ashley thought they had outsmarted me, but they had no idea what was coming. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about taking back control, about showing them that they couldn't break me. And when I was done, they would both regret the day they decided to betray me. For the next few days, I played the perfect wife. I cooked Jacob's favorite meals, laughed at his jokes, and even indulged in small talk about his work life. Every time he lied to me, my resolve grew stronger. Meanwhile, I was putting my plan into motion. I needed to hit them where it hurt, not with a public confrontation, but with a methodical, calculated takedown. They would never see it coming. The first step was gathering allies. There's a saying, "The enemy of my enemy is my friend." In this case, the enemy was Ashley, and her weak spot was her reputation. She was always desperate to be liked, to appear flawless. But I knew her secrets, the skeletons she tried so hard to keep hidden. I started by reaching out to one of her old friends, Emily, someone Ashley had discarded when she no longer found her useful. Emily had always been wary of Ashley, and when I called her, she was more than willing to listen. "You're telling me she married Jacob?" Emily asked, her voice dripping with disbelief. "Yes," I replied, keeping my tone even, behind my back while pretending to be my best friend. Emily let out a bitter laugh. "That sounds exactly like her. She's always been a snake." We talked for hours, swapping stories and connecting the dots. Emily had her own grudges against Ashley, and together, we started piecing together a plan to expose her true colors. While Emily worked on gathering dirt on Ashley, I focused on Jacob. He was predictable in his routines, leaving for late meetings, texting Ashley while pretending to work. I used this to my advantage, planting small seeds of doubt in his mind. One evening, as he was heading out the door, I casually mentioned, "Oh, by the way, I ran into one of your coworkers today. They said the office has been pretty quiet this week." He froze, his hand on the doorknob. "Who did you talk to?" he asked, his voice strained. "Just a quick chat with Mark," I said, feigning innocence. He seemed surprised when I mentioned, "How busy you been?" Jacob forced a laugh. "Mark doesn't know what he's talking about. The guy's always out of the loop." I smiled, watching as he hurried out the door. The cracks in his facade were starting to show. The second phase of my plan involved money. Jacob had always been careless with our finances, and I had quietly taken control of most of our accounts years ago. Now, I used that control to start draining his safety net. I transferred small amounts from his personal savings into a private account I had opened in my name. Nothing too obvious, just enough to leave him scrambling when the time came. At the same time, I began documenting everything: his texts, his emails, his financial records. I wanted an airtight case, something that would leave no room for excuses when the truth came out. A week later, I received a call from Emily. "You're not going to believe this," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "I found out Ashley's been seeing someone else behind Jacob's back." I froze, the phone pressed tightly to my ear. "Are you sure?" "Positive," Emily replied. "It's some guy named Mike. They've been meeting at this little cafe downtown. I even got pictures. I couldn't help but laugh. The irony of it all. Ashley, the self-proclaimed queen of loyalty, betraying Jacob just as easily as she had betrayed me. Send me everything, I said, already formulating the next steps. The next morning, I decided to test Ashley's loyalty. I sent her a text, pretending to be oblivious. Hey, Ash! Let's do a girls' night soon. I feel like we haven't caught up in forever. She replied almost immediately. Of course. How about Friday? Jacob said he's working late, so it's perfect. I smiled, already anticipating the chaos that would unfold. Friday arrived, and I made sure Jacob left for his meeting before heading out myself. But instead of meeting Ashley for girls' night, I went to the cafe where Emily had spotted her with Mike. Sure enough, there she was, laughing and flirting with a tall, broad-shouldered man. They looked far too comfortable with each other for this to be a casual meeting. I snapped a few photos from a distance, then sent them to Jacob with a simple caption, "Thought you should know." When I got home that evening, Jacob was pacing in the living room, his face a mix of anger and confusion. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up his phone. I shrugged, feigning surprise. "I don't know, Jacob. Maybe you should ask your wife." His face went pale, and for a moment he was completely speechless. "What are you talking about?" he finally stammered. I walked up to him, my voice steady and cold. "I know everything, Jacob. The texts, the emails, the wedding. I've been watching you this whole time, and you didn't even notice." He opened his mouth to respond, but I cut him off. "Do you know what the best part is?" I said, a smile creeping onto my face. "Ashley has been playing you too. While you were sneaking around behind my back, she was sneaking around behind yours." I held up my phone, showing him the photos of Ashley and Mike. His eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear in his expression. "You thought you were so clever," I continued, my voice dripping with contempt. "But the truth is, you're both nothing more than selfish, pathetic liars." Jacob sank onto the couch, his head in his hands. He looked defeated, broken. But I wasn't done yet. "This is just the beginning," I said, turning to leave. "You and Ashley wanted to betray me? Fine. But now you'll both see what happens when you cross the wrong person." I walked out of the room, leaving Jacob to stew in his own misery. The storm was coming, and neither of them was ready for it. The final stage of my plan began the next day. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring neither Jacob nor Ashley could hurt me, or anyone else, again. The first step was public exposure. People like Jacob and Ashley thrived in secrecy, hiding their true selves behind polished facades. It was time to shatter those illusions. I started with Ashley. Using the information Emily and I had gathered, I created an anonymous email account and sent her photos with Mike to her social circle. Friends, family, co-workers, no one was spared. Along with the photos, I included excerpts from her emails with Jacob, making it clear she was just as duplicitous as he was. The fallout was immediate. My phone buzzed non-stop with messages from mutual friends, all shocked and appalled by Ashley's betrayal. Her perfect image was crumbling, and the whispers of gossip quickly turned into loud condemnation. Next, I turned my attention to Jacob. Armed with the financial records and emails I had gathered, I contacted his company's HR department. Jacob had been using company resources to carry out his affair, a clear violation of their policies. I also included proof of his embezzlement, small, hidden transactions he had made to cover his tracks. It didn't take long for the hammer to fall. Jacob was called into a meeting with his boss and escorted out of the building shortly after. By the end of the day, he had lost his job, his reputation in shambles. But I wasn't done yet. I filed for divorce, presenting my lawyer with all the evidence of Jacob's infidelity. Thanks to our prenuptial agreement, his actions guaranteed that I would walk away with the majority of our assets. The house, the car, the savings, everything he valued was now legally mine. Jacob tried to fight back. Of course, he showed up at the house one evening, pounding on the door and demanding to talk. "You can't do this to me," he yelled, his voice desperate. "You're ruining my life." I opened the door just enough to look at him, my expression calm and detached. "Ruining your life? Jacob, you did that all on your own. I'm just making sure you face the consequences." He stared at me, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Please, we can fix this. We can start over." I laughed, cutting him off. "Start over? You married my best friend, lied to my face, and mocked me behind my back. There's no fixing this. Now get off my property before I call the police." He hesitated for a moment, but when he saw the determination in my eyes, he turned and walked away. As for Ashley, her life was unraveling just as spectacularly. Mike had dumped her the moment the photos went public, and she was ostracized by nearly everyone she knew. She tried to reach out to me, leaving tearful voicemails and begging for forgiveness. But I didn't respond. Forgiveness wasn't mine to give. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. In the weeks that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. The house felt different without Jacob's presence, quieter, lighter. I redecorated, getting rid of anything that reminded me of him. I also reconnected with old friends, people I had lost touch with during my marriage. They rallied around me, offering support and reminding me that I wasn't alone. For the first time in years, I felt free. One evening, as I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. "You did it," she wrote. "They're both out of your life for good. How does it feel?" I smiled, typing back, "It feels like a fresh start." And it did. Jacob and Ashley had tried to break me, but in the end, they'd only made me stronger. Their betrayal had taught me the value of self-respect, of standing up for myself and refusing to be a victim. They thought they had won, but the truth was, I had taken everything from them, their secrets, their lies, their power. And as I watched the sunset that evening, I knew one thing for certain. I was finally free. The chapter of Jacob and Ashley was closed, and a new one was beginning. A chapter where I was the author of my own story, stronger and wiser than ever before.